Hello, welcome, of course, to our discussion. Here we're talking about social media and what companies, the social media companies, should do really to monitor for, we say terrorism, right? The terroristic messages. Can we go beyond that? Okay, let's go beyond that. So when we look at the question of whether social media platforms should be required to monitor their sites for messages of terror, again, we're going to use that in a broad context because I know the arguments that we could say of so what constitutes terror. In this day and age, it could be really from what we say on the political spectrum of the left to the right. So, without getting into politics, let's use the word terror in a broad sense. So, even to the point of the wokeness, right? So, what responsibilities should they have in which is really a complex and multifaceted issue? That touches on matters of security, freedom of expression, privacy, and then there's the technical capabilities of these platforms. So, while I really look at this discussion can be talked about in a lot of more opinionated. How do we really look at it from the scholarly or the academic standpoint, or even the professional standpoint? So here's some arguments that I want to kind of outline and considerations of both sides of this debate to really be able to provide more for a comprehensive viewpoint. So let's look at, say, arguments for monitoring. Let's look at preventing violence and terrorism. When we look at proponents that argue that social media platforms have a responsibility to prevent their services from being used to plan, incite, or glorify acts of terrorism and violence. By monitoring and removing terror related content, platforms, of course, can help prevent real world harm. What about the legal and ethical responsibilities? There's an argument that platforms have both a legal and ethical duty to ensure their services are not used for illegal activities in many jurisdictions. And when I say jurisdictions, yes, it could be here in the United States. It could even get down to the state level. But let's look at it, we can even say, from globalist viewpoints. What about European Union? You have GDPRs, some regulations that whole countries have outlined. So when we look at laws that require companies to take active steps to prevent their platforms from being used for terrorism or criminal activities, one just needs to look at China, how it, even with TikTok, which is created by their own country, and that it really able to restrict its citizenry from even viewing TikToks made on the platform by people in other countries. So let's look at it from the the public safety aspect. So ensuring public safety is always a priority, right? And social media platforms, like other entities, should contribute to this goal by electing and addressing content that poses a threat to security. What about reputation and trust? Now, monitoring for terror messages can help maintain the trust and the safety of the platform's community, which is essential for the social media companies' reputation and, of course, user retention. So let's look at arguments against mandatory monitoring. Let's look at that, what we talked about earlier, freedom of expression and privacy. So critics argue that mandatory monitoring can infringe on privacy and freedom of expression. So the challenge here is the balance that's needed for security with respect to users' rights to free speech and privacy. What about technical and practical challenges? So the sheer volume of content and the nuances in language can make it technically challenging to accurately monitor and identify terror-related content without a significant number of false positives or negatives. So when we talk about fact checkers, I mean, when you have platforms like, yes, TikTok, um, Instagram, Facebook, do they employ individuals who speak over 150 languages? No. Do they rely on algorithms of their computer software to capture this because it is in foreign languages? Yes. So when we look at false positives, we see it all the time, depending on what content you're looking at, that fact checkers block a post. And that's not because it's a real person. It is an algorithm that blocks that content. And it's because either word usage or what it has delineated that the content, meaning the picture or the video, the graphics that it may stop it from being used. So is there the potential, though, for abuse? This is another one. So there's a concern that such monitoring could be expanded or abused for the purpose beyond preventing terrorism, such as suppressing dissent or monitoring political opponents. We've seen this time and again, that Meta, Facebook, Instagram, did this quite a bit in 2016 and 2020 elections. But we also saw Russia utilizing some of this abuse and really did install bots. And what once Elon Musk took over X, formerly Twitter, we found thousands of bots, meaning fake accounts, constructed by Russia. What about here in the United States and individuals of political parties or political movements or even social activist movements that did the same thing? We have to look at that, and that's part of the reasoning for monitoring. We've called for the monitoring. So what about global variability in definitions? And this is what we've talked about in our unit live lecture. We have to look at the definitions of what terrorism and extremism, and we see across jurisdictions the different definitions. To quote Ronald Reagan, where he said one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, or did he say one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter? Either way, you can see that interchangeability, right? That's the problem with our definitions, and the call for the U.S. government to update its definitions of what terrorism and extremism is something that is a challenge. And so it's even more challenging for global platforms to apply what is looked at as a consistent standard. So when we look at the responsibilities of social media sites, given these arguments, the responsibilities of social media sites might include such things as developing clear policies. How many of you are actually going to read thousands of lines of what they say are policy? When you create an account, do you read the user agreement? Many people don't. I mean, many people don't. So platforms should have more clear, transparent policies regarding what constitutes terror-related content and how such content is handled. We've seen, unfortunately, the double standards, the multi-tears of what thus far X, Meta, has believed to have been their clear policies on what is, say, hate speech, or is politically motivated or not. What about investing in technology and staff? Well, investing in technology to detect, of course, terror content, more accurately, and hiring staff with the expertise to review and make nuanced decisions. Yes, if you look under each of the organizations, you go to their actual web page and you look at their jobs, do you see a job announcement for a counter-terrorism expert? What about someone like myself with 30 plus years of knowing what would really constitute terrorism? Um, do you see job announcements for legal individuals? No, you don't. Because our legal individuals going to sit and say, yep, that post is definitely from the Islamic state. That definitely is propaganda teaching terrorism tactics, tools, and techniques, so on and so forth. So, what about collaboration with law enforcement? Now, I'll say this for sure. Social media sites have had in the past very good collaborative efforts. There are individuals within these companies that their sole job is to work with law enforcement. I myself, with the Bureau, have actually contacted individuals at each one of these social platforms, and to include even, say, Google. Bing, so on and so forth, to say, hey, we have somebody who somehow has created accounts at these social media sites, have actually gone through great lengths to create accounts through emails, accounts through your interfaces. So therefore, we think that this is either false identities or they've stolen identities. Even more difficult nowadays with AI generative photos. We used to look for, of course, facial recognition that, yes, this is somebody's real account, and then this is somebody who stole that identity. So when appropriate, platforms should always collaborate with law enforcement agencies to address threats of terrorism while respecting legal standards and user privacy. Let's look at the argument very quickly on, with Apple and their user privacy agreement when it came about with the 2018 San Bernardino, 2016 San Bernardino two bombers that, on the behalf of the Islamic Front, really had taken husband and wife, had taken hostages, had shot individuals, and then also used bombs. Meanwhile, once their phones, after their shootout with law enforcement, they then, Apple would not unlock their phones. The FBI had to take them to court, and the FBI ended up using a third party to jailbreak the phone in order to ensure that they could look at the data, that maybe there was other cells, maybe there were other individuals involved in the planning and the execution of that operation. So unfortunately, the collaboration with law enforcement in that instance broke down. What about user education and reporting tools? We have the like, the dislike, report abuse, educating users about the importance of reporting terror-related content and providing them with an easy-to-use tool for reporting suspicious activity. I would have to say yes, that there is quite an easier way to do it, but with the way that they have, it doesn't make it hard for individuals to report such concerns. So last but not least, let's look at transparency reporting. So publishing transparency reports detailing the efforts to combat terror-related content, including the number of posts, removing, and the nature of these violations, has yet to have really been seen by these companies. Why? Is it because of their, again, you go back up to tarnishing their reputations or not? So when we look at, there is always going to be compelling arguments for social media platforms to really monitor and address messages of terror. Doing so raises significant challenges for them, and concerns must be carefully balanced. I think, again, they're businesses. So trying to really understand from the user part that, hey, okay, it's not necessarily terrorism, but it could be becoming that. Is that something I need to report or not? The goal here should be to create a safe online environment while respecting user rights and navigating the technical and ethical complexities that are involved. Okay, so you hear my take on this. I really hope that if you want to respond, this is something that I like students to really dive into. when you look at a discussion? Are you talking about these complexities, or are you just off the cuff, really looking at the problem for what you want to see? Did you do research? Did you? I'm not saying you, again, these are discussion boards. They don't have to have research behind them, but you as a graduate student, you want to conduct research. You want to be informed. You want to be able to impart some of these arguments. How are you going to argue back against myself with these points, these debating points that I've pointed out, both pro and con? Okay. So with that, have a great rest of your week.